Chapter 31 You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chu Qing and Hua Miao Miao, Part 1. Actually, in her previous life, Gu Yoli had not been close to Chu Qing. They could only be counted as acquaintances and did not really have much to do with each other. However, they did have a mutual friend, and that was Hua Miao Miao. From the name, one would definitely think that Hua Miao Miao was a girl. But, Hua Miao Miao was a young and dashing man. He was a trendy guy with 6 piercings on his left ear. I am also a freshman at Jingqing University. My name is Chu Qing. Chu Qing smiled sweetly as she extended her fair and tender hand towards her. Gu Yoli stretched her hand out immediately as well and shook her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you. Chu Qing suddenly transformed from a delicate, pretty lady to a righteous black belt hero. Me too. A pleasure to meet you, as well. If there's trouble in the future, look for me. I'll protect you. Gu Yoli agreed with a bright smile. Sure. Protect. Protect your head. You're a woman, how can you be so rough? A beautiful boy came walking towards them. He looked at Chu Qing with disdain and said sarcastically, "Look at you, a tomboy through and through. This attitude won't help you get married." Hua Miao Miao. Gu Yoli almost exclaimed in shock. She had been wondering a few moments ago if she would be able to meet him any time in the near future due to Chu Qing's presence. However, she hadn't thought that it would be this soon. Could it be that Hua Miao Miao was also going to attend Jingqing University? That must be it. Hua Miao Miao was a world-renowned fashion designer and stylist. 7 years later. Chu Qing heard Hua Miao Miao's sarcastic words but did not get angry. Instead, she just glared at him, coldly. Hua Miao Miao also rolled his eyes at Chu Qing. After that, he looked at Gu Yoli and lifted the so familiar orchid fingers as he said with a smile, "Hello, I am Hua Miao Miao. Also a freshman at Jingqing University." Gu Yoli was very happy to see him and returned his smile with her own. "Hello, I am Gu Yoli. It's a pleasure to meet you." Hua Miao Miao looked at Gu Yoli's beautiful eyes and said, "You're really pretty. Prettier than a certain tomboy." It only took one look for Hua Miao Miao to form a liking for Gu Yoli. He felt respect in her eyes, unlike most women who would detest his feminine style. When they looked at him, they behaved as though he was a freak. He couldn't help but broaden his grin while Gu Yoli praised him back. "Thank you. You're very handsome too." Chu Qing scoffed. "Indeed, so handsome that he looks like a Korean." Hua Miao Miao looked at Chu Qing without care and pointed at his cheek. "Who cares about looking like a Korean? Korean pretty boys are all man-made. I am a natural." Chu Qing laughed and replied viciously, "Please, don't get ahead of yourself. What I wanted to say is that you look like a gook, but since we have a new friend here, I thought I would use a more civilized term. That's why I said you look like a Korean." Hua Miao Miao stomped his feet and pointed at Chu Qing with his slender fingers. He started speaking angrily, keep your orchid fingers to yourself. What's wrong with my fingers? Let me tell you, don't you dare belittle my beautiful, slender, artistic fingers. They are the most powerful instrument in this entire world. Mind you, I might just point you to death with my orchid fingers." Hua Miao Miao retracted his hand and stomped off with a force that could have created a hole in the ground. Derogatory term for Koreans or other people of East Asian or Southeast Asian descent. Chapter 32 You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chu Qing and Hua Miao Miao, Part 2. After walking forward a little, Hua Miao Miao turned back and looked at Gu Yoli. He said with a smile, "You're my friend from now on. Let's meet up more often." Saying that, he sashayed off. Chu Qing shuddered and her face held disdain. "Look at him. Gosh, I can't stand him. I have goosebumps all over my body." Gu Yoli blinked at her words but then said with a grin, "The two of you are pretty close. Chu Qing was horrified. How did you reach that conclusion? I'm not afraid to declare that I hate him to the core. Say, isn't it weird for a man to behave like that? I told him so and he got back at me saying, I just like it that way, what can you do about it? He sounded so cocky about himself. Chu Qing mimicked Hua Miao's tone when saying that line. Gu Yoli laughed and shook her head in disbelief. She bent down and lifted her luggage. Let's go. We should get to the reception area quickly to settle our administrative matters. Chu Qing smiled gently, revealing her cute dimples. After that, she lifted her two large suitcases. Gu Yoli looked at her and then the suitcases before she said in a shock, Chu Qing, are your suitcases full? Chu Qing nodded. Yeah. But you lifted them up just like that. Gu Yoli was dumbfounded. She compared Chu Qing's luggage with her two small suitcases. This is nothing. I can even run while carrying them, along with one of yours. After she said that, Chu Qing snatched Gu Yoli's small suitcase and started running ahead. Gu Yoli stared at Chu Qing's fast disappearing back with a dumbfounded expression. Is she an alien? After staring blankly in the space for a second, she quickly chased after her. Chu Qing, wait for me. There was a reason for Gu Yoli to say that Hua Miao and Chu Qing were close. In her previous life, Gu Yoli had just been a jewelry salesperson, so technically, she shouldn't have known Hua Miao. But once, Hua Miao went to the jewelry shop where she was working and accidentally left his wallet behind. It was Gu Yoli who picked up his wallet and went over personally to his studio to return it to him. Hua Miao was a renowned fashion designer with many wealthy women as his clients. In order to thank Gu Yoli for returning his wallet, Hua Miao would always go to Gu Yoli whenever he needed some jewelry to match his outfits after that. As time went by, the two of them became familiar with each other. Hua Miao would always talk about Chu Qing to Gu Yoli, but Gu Yoli had met Chu Qing only a few times and they were mere acquaintances. Chu Qing was a very impressive and mysterious figure at that time. Every time she saw Chu Qing, Gu Yoli would be reminded of those amazing female Secret Service agents in the James Bond movies. Gu Yoli had once asked Hua Miao what Chu Qing did for a living. Hua Miao had told her that Chu Qing was in the army, but he said it like it was not a big deal. Chu Qing and Hua Miao were neighbors who had known each other since they were young. According to Hua Miao, they grew up fighting with each other. So it was really a mystery whether they could be considered good friends. They were not on bad terms since the two of them still kept in contact over the years and would always look for each other whenever they needed to talk. Of course, they would exchange sarcastic remarks but would still help each other out in the end. But they always started quarreling whenever they had met. Chu Qing would mock Hua Miao for no reason while Hua Miao also behaved resentful towards her. One could have assumed that a man and woman like that would make a quarrelsome but loving couple. That was a wrong assumption. A big mistake. Hua Miao and Chu Qing were in fact, love rivals. Chapter 33. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Misery of military training. Hua Miao was a homosexual, whom people would normally call gay. The man he liked happened to be involved with Chu Qing. Chu Qing knew about this and the two of them had often quarreled because of that man. However, the quarrel would always end with Hua Miao getting defeated, and because of that, Hua Miao would always crib to Gu Yoli. But it was just a complaint. After that, Hua Miao would always say that he did not lose. The problem was that the man didn't like men. Luckily, the woman that man liked was Chu Qing, that tomboy, so it wasn't someone else who had gotten lucky. Childhood friends are like that. The university's usual practice was to conduct military training for the freshmen for a month. All the freshmen would be in camo uniform, waking up at 6 a.m. every day to train in the school field. The mornings and nights were still tolerable. However, the afternoon sun was really baking them like they were in an oven. Those who got a tan were lucky. But some people's ears were sunburnt badly. The worst part was the military dress. It was a long sleeved camo uniform with a cap. Wearing that kind of uniform in such hot weather was worse than anything else. However, when the students gave feedback about that, the officer in charge said that it was for their own good. The long sleeves and cap would prevent everyone's skin from peeling and getting sunburnt. Besides, any sort of feedback was useless. They still had to be in their camo military uniform and cap every morning as they stood in attention, did formation training, and goose-step training. Usually, they would stand in attention for several hours. To Gu Yoli, all these were not very tough things to do. Before she landed the job as a jewelry salesperson, she had been a drifter. A drifter was someone who set up street stalls on the ground. Her job needed her to run a lot, whether in the blazing sun or raging wind. As long as it didn't rain, she would be there with a huge bag of goods to sell. Hence, the military training was a piece of cake for her. However, that was not the case for the other students. A few days into the training, many people started fainting from a heat stroke almost every day. That situation made the officer in charge shake his head as he lamented at how weak the children were these days. Talking about military training, people would usually think of the devil officer in charge. Actually, no matter how scary the officer in charge was, he would still be a little lenient in his punishments. The scariest one was the company commander. After so many days of military training, they were punished almost every night by the company commander. It was either a standing punishment, or sitting, or worst, squatting. The officer in charge would tell everyone to tolerate it because the company commander was about to retire from the military. He wanted to receive an outstanding commander award, so he had planned to push them to their absolute limits. The officer in charge pointed a finger upwards and told them that the higher UPS had sent an important person to overlook the matter, who would be visiting the campus soon. In the end, everyone kept scolding the company commander behind his back. After 7 days of military training, there were more and more people fainting almost every day, and the ambulance even had to be called in for serious cases. Gu Yoli glanced at Xiao Qi, who was standing beside her, and realized that her face was as pale as a sheet. She was also perspiring more than most people. She genuinely did not look well. Gu Yoli became distracted from the exercise while looking at Xiao Qi. The officer in charge walked over to her immediately and howled in her ear, "What are you doing? Where are your eyes focused? Is your head born facing the side? Newbie, are you asking for a punishment?" The officer in charge was already being polite to Gu Yoli by only scolding her. If it was a male student, he would have definitely kicked him by now. Training university students was just like training soldiers. No, it was worse than training soldiers. Gu Yoli's breath quickened. She straightened up and looked in front, nervously. Chapter 34. You are listening at novelfull.audio. First, young master Yu's words are as precious as gold. However, in the next moment, Xiao Qi fell on Gu Yoli. Gu Yoli subconsciously extended her arms to catch her. "Sir, she has fainted." Gu Yoli spoke loudly as she looked at the officer in charge in a fluster. That was a rule set by the officer in charge of the military training. Words had to be spoken out loudly and with vigor. The officer looked at Gu Yoli coldly and said, "She just fainted. What are you getting so worked up about?" As he said that, he pointed at 2 male students and told them to take Xiao Qi to the resting area. After that, he looked at Gu Yoli and shouted, "Have I told you that you need to report first before talking to the officer in charge?" Gu Yoli frowned and replied loudly immediately, "Yes, sir. 5 rounds within 10 minutes. Start now." Immediately after he said that, he lifted his hand to look at his watch and did not look at Gu Yoli again. Chu Qing, who was in the neighboring lane, was shocked when she saw Gu Yoli. The officer in charge had already shouted, "Start," but she was still not moving. In a moment of anxiousness, Chu Qing shouted out, "Yoli, start running." Gu Yoli was about to start running but Chu Qing's shout spurred her on further. Immediately, she regained her senses and rushed to the track. She started running around the soccer field. Chu Qing's officer in charge also appeared in front of her immediately and howled, "Who told you to be such a busy body? 20 rounds in half an hour." Unexpectedly, Chu Qing smiled and said brightly, "Yes, sir." After that, she dashed off like the wind and caught up with Gu Yoli, quickly. "Why have you been punished?" Gu Yoli asked Chu Qing, who was now running beside her. Chu Qing clapped her hands and smiled nonchalantly, "I came to keep you company. All the best. You'll be done in no time at all." Gu Yoli was very impressed with Chu Qing at this moment. She panted and asked her, "Aren't you tired?" Chu Qing waved her arms around to show that she was full of energy. "This training isn't much. My grandpa trained me when I was young. It was way worse than this." Just then, the officer in charge shouted loudly, "Run seriously. Otherwise, I'll add 200 frog jumps." Gu Yoli got such a fright that she did not dare make another sound. Besides, if she were to carry on talking, she would not have the strength to run. Even, Chu Qing did not disturb Gu Yoli anymore and carried on running with her. At this moment, in the school's military training commanding room, there was a conversation going on. Company Commander Chen pointed at the monitor showing the images of Gu Yoli and Chu Qing, who were running at the moment. He addressed the aloof man sitting on the commander's chair. "Young Master Yu, these two girls aren't bad. They are more resilient than most of the boys. No matter what drill we're conducting in the military training, they do not complain or grumble." As he said that, Company Commander Chen pointed at Chu Qing and said, "This Chu Qing is definitely not simple. She must have been trained before. I think she's not bad. If we groom her, she should be able to fit your requirement. Young Master Yu, what are your views?" The man who was addressed as Young Master Yu replied softly with an "Oh." Company Commander Chen was about to go crazy. He really wanted to flip the table. "Young Master, can you not treat your words like gold? Can you give me a more concrete answer? Who would know what your 'oh' means?" But he would never dare to say this out loud. Company Commander Chen smiled with infinite patience. After that, he realized that Young Master Yu did not seem to be interested in Chu Qing. His gaze was fixed on the other girl called Gu Yoli. He asked in bewilderment, "Young Master Yu, do you feel that the other girl would be a better candidate?" Chapter 35. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Meeting the aloof man again, Company Commander Chen felt that although this girl called Gu Yoli was resilient, one could easily tell that she was weak. That she was definitely unsuitable for a place like the Special Corps. "She's not suitable." Young Master Yu's gaze was still cold as he said that meaningfully, but it seemed that he was implying something else. Company Commander Chen was puzzled and thought to himself. If Young Master Yu didn't find her suitable, why did he keep staring at her? The confused Company Commander Chen also started staring at Gu Yoli. His first impression was that this lass was too skinny. With the large camo military uniform on, she looked like a flat board with no curves. However, her looks were not bad. Her lips were red and teeth were white. Her eyes were bright and her face was the size of a palm. Her hair was bunched up and stuffed in her hat, making her look pure and delicate. "Oh." As Company Commander Chen continued looking, he suddenly understood. First Young Master Yu Feibai had set his eyes on her. When he thought of that, Company Commander Chen snickered silently before saying panderingly, "This lass is called Gu Yoli. She's quite a lively spirit." Yu Feibai looked up at him, coldly. That expression was an obvious expression of disinterest. Company Commander Chen laughed awkwardly to cover his mistake and felt that this Young Master Yu's mind was so hard to read. It was harder than finding a needle in a haystack. What was that gaze supposed to mean? Although Chu Qing and Gu Yoli had not known each other for long, they felt an inexplicable liking for each other. They were in the same company during the training, so they would always end up eating and resting together. Because of that, Hua Miaomiao was very unhappy because he was in another group and had a different break time, so he almost never met them. However, whenever there was an overlap in their resting time, he would go over immediately to look for Gu Yoli and tell her to be careful of Chu Qing, calling her a witch. He told her one day that if Chu Qing were to bully her, he would help her teach Chu Qing a lesson. Actually, Gu Yoli knew that Hua Miaomiao might say that he was there to visit her. He was actually coming to visit Chu Qing. On the 10th day of the military training, the darn autumn weather got warmer instead of becoming cooler. All the students had got cracked lips and felt as though they were about to faint as they stood under the blazing sun. However, on the surface, everyone put on a spirited and energetic look. That was because the officer in charge had just announced that if anyone were to move within the next half hour, they would be punished with an additional hour of being stationary. Under such a command, everyone would persevere, no matter what. Gu Yoli was on her period, and whenever she was on her period, she would get cramps. She thought that since today was the first day, she would be able to endure it. However, she didn't expect that her cramps would get so bad that it became tough to even stand up straight after a while. Another intense cramp assailed her, and Gu Yoli's pale face was now wet with perspiration. She felt as though all her energy was going to drain out. No, she needed to request for a leave of absence. Gu Yoli was about to raise her hand when an awe-inspiring military Hummer drove over to the field slowly. The moment the officers in charge saw that, they went there immediately. Gu Yoli frowned. It looks like she would not be able to get her leave of absence right now. After the military Hummer rolled to a stop, Company Commander Chen and a tall officer stepped out of the car. The officer was wearing a dark green military uniform, and from the emblem on his shoulder, she could tell that he was a major general. He had a pair of black sunglasses on, so no one could tell where he was looking. His features were sharp and carried an indifferent expression. His lips were pressed together as he exuded an imposing aura of a leader. Chapter 36. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So his name is Yu Feibai because his back was facing the sun and he had a pair of sunglasses on. Gu Yoli could not see his face clearly. However, this scene reminded her of an ancient time general from a Chinese ink painting, beautiful, gallant and dashing. Right then, another fit of cramps made Gu Yoli close her eyes in unbearable pain. Is it going smoothly? The man said in a low tone that sounded as smooth as wine. That voice. No. In that wave of shock, Gu Yoli opened her eyes and saw that heavenly beauty. It's him, it really is him. Gu Yoli recognized him. That person was actually the aloof man whom she had seen in the cafe that day, the overbearing man who bought her a dress. What is he doing here? Gu Yoli was really stupefied. The officers in charge stood in attention and saluted. Reporting to the senior official. Everything is going smoothly. Before he could even finish his words, the muttering among the students grew louder. They were all curious about the man who had stepped out of the military Hummer. The chattering was loud enough, and Gu Yoli heard the conversation of two students standing in the row before hers. Wow, this officer in charge is so handsome. He's not an officer in charge. I have a relative studying in our school. I heard from him that Yu Feibai is an officer sent by the Special Corps to find extraordinary talent from our school. Wow, a Special Corps officer, how cool and handsome. Yu Feibai, so his name is Yu Feibai. His surname is Yu. Is it the Yu family, one of the big four families? The factions in Jingcheng were very complicated. Amongst them, the four most influential families were at the helm of one area, each. Yu family was one of them. The Yu family was a military family. Old Master Yu has many sons and many grandsons. All of them were said to be the cream of the crop. That was necessary since the internal strife between different factions was very fierce. Everyone was constantly thinking of ways to pull each other down, and the only way to maintain the glory of the household was to groom more capable descendants. If a family had fewer members, that would mean the end was near for that family. Is this aloof man from that Yu family? Gu Yoli thought that he should be. He was emitting an aloof and elegant aura which any ordinary person would not possess. The officers in charge were immediately embarrassed. Just after they told the senior official that everything was going smoothly, chattering had erupted. Attention! The officers in charge ran back to their squads and shouted loudly. The embarrassed officers in charge started scolding the students. What's the ruckus about? Do you think this is a market? Are you asking for punishment? You're feeling uncomfortable without a punishment, right? All of you, turn to the right, 3 rounds in a minute. 1 more round for every minute you exceed. I'm done for. Gu Yoli shrieked inside. 3 rounds in a minute, that would only be possible if they were riding a bicycle. As expected, everyone was punished, and as they added 1 round after another, Gu Yoli lost count of the number of rounds they had run till now. She only knew that people all around her were groaning in pain. Meanwhile, she tried to endure her cramps but could no longer continue to bear the pain after a few rounds. Chu Qing saw her crouching on the ground with her hands over her tummy and ran over immediately. When she saw Gu Yoli's face, she got a rude shock. Yoli! Are you all right? Gu Yoli squatted on the ground with her face as pale as a sheet. Her chin was dripping with perspiration and her brows were tightly knitted. She was in so much pain that she could no longer speak and gradually sank to the ground. When the officer in charge saw something amiss, he rushed over and shouted, "What's going on?" Chapter 37. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bridal style. Carry. The officer in charge got closer and realized that something was wrong with Gu Yoli. Her face was so pale that the fine veins on her neck could be seen clearly. He immediately told the people around to move away. Make way, make way, make way. You, and you, take her to the sickbay. The 2 students who were tasked by the officer in charge nodded quickly and bent down to carry Gu Yoli. Just then, a long pair of arms reached there and lifted Gu Yoli up horizontally, faster than them. All the students were stunned. Isn't that officer you? Besides, this was the legendary bridal carry. This scene was so romantic. Many students were casting envious gazes at Gu Yoli, wishing that they were the ones who had fainted just now. Officer Yu, who already had the woman in his arms, said calmly, "Carry on." The officer in charge was also slightly stunned, but immediately after that, he shouted loudly, "What are all of you spacing out for? Continue running." Ah! Chu Qing was shocked. Beside her, some female students said agitatedly, "Gosh, my face feels so hot right now." He is really too mesmerizing. Chu Qing regained her senses and left quickly. She was worried about Gu Yoli and quickened her pace to finish her running. Gu Yoli was cramping very badly and was drenched in perspiration. All of a sudden, she was lifted into the air and was trapped in a broad embrace. She looked up and saw that beautiful face. Under the sunlight, his thick eyelashes were lowered, casting a beautiful shadow on his face. Gu Yoli's eyes widened in shock and felt as though she had fallen down a rabbit hole. She obviously hadn't understood what was happening. Yu Feibai moved his gaze and looked into Gu Yoli's shocked eyes. His lips were pressed together as though he was not affected by any of it. At the same time, the arms which were carrying Gu Yoli shifted her a little. Another wave of excruciating pain came assailing and Gu Yoli frowned. She let out a soft moan. Her face was scrunched up in pain. She quickly extended her arms and put them around Yu Feibai's neck and stuck closer to him to alleviate the sharp pain that was caused by the movement. Yu Feibai's eyes glimmered. This. First, young master Yu, are you sure you didn't do it on purpose just now? Yu Feibai carried Gu Yoli to the school's sickbay. The school doctor checked her and gave Gu Yoli 2 painkillers. Because her condition was serious and the doctor was afraid that it might leave her with a permanent side effect, he told Yu Feibai to send her to the hospital for another checkup. Upon hearing the word hospital, Gu Yoli furrowed her brows. She was in so much pain that she didn't want to talk, so she only waved her hand repeatedly to show that she didn't want to go. However, no matter how hard she waved her hand, Yu Feibai picked her up again as though he did not see it. Gu Yoli struggled. I don't want to go to the hospital. I'll be fine after taking the medicine and sleeping it off. Yu Feibai looked into her eyes coldly and did not reveal any emotion. Don't move. His voice was elegant and calm, but it gave off an imposing aura. Gu Yoli did not know what was wrong with her because she actually stopped moving. His deep-set eyes were terrifyingly cold, and that gorgeously beautiful face challenged a person's visual limits and attacked her rationality. Gu Yoli could only feel that her face was stupefyingly hot. She bit her lips as she tried to stop herself from making a sound. Besides, her cramps were torturing her so much that she did not want to talk much, anyways. Hence, she reached her arms out again to put around Yu Feibai's neck and shrank into his embrace. Chapter 38. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Panic due to trauma. As she sat in the passenger seat, Gu Yoli leaned her head against the backrest and looked out of the window, silently. She did not know whether it was because of the medication or the tiring military training, but she fell asleep. When she arrived at the hospital, it was another round of torture. Her long lashes trembled as she saw the doctor giving her a checkup and put her on a drip in a half-asleep state. Soon after, she closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. After some time, the drip had finished and Gu Yoli finally woke up. Her cramps were gone. Because of the military training, she had not had a good sleep in a very long time, so right now, Gu Yoli felt quite comfortable. She stretched lazily but was shocked to see a tall figure standing by the window. Yu Feibai. Gosh, why hasn't he gone back? Gu Yoli suddenly sat up straight on the bed. Good evening, sir. Gu Yoli saluted. This was the result of the slave-driving military training. Yu Feibai walked away from the window and looked at Gu Yoli. You're awake. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Gu Yoli realized that she was really weird. Every time she saw this person, her heart would race for some reason, as though she had done something wrong. Gu Yoli's face blushed, but she calmed her unsettled heart and said, reporting to the senior official. I am all right now. I can go back to school. Yu Feibai lifted his arm and looked at his watch. He said calmly, it's almost 11 p.m. The school gates are already closed. Spend the night in the hospital and return to school tomorrow morning. Gu Yoli quickly nodded at Yu Feibai. Yes, sir. Goodbye, sir. Yu Feibai put his hands behind him and nodded. Goodbye. As she watched Yu Feibai disappear out of the door of the ward, Gu Yoli heaved a sigh of relief. However, she felt as though a huge rock was pressing against her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. In the sterile white ward, with white sheets, Gu Yoli was reminded of the scene when she had died in her previous life. It seemed that she had developed a phobia of hospitals now. She switched off the light and buried herself under the covers. She shut her eyes and tried to immerse herself in the darkness. But that didn't work. The conversation between Zhao Mingcheng and Yang Mengshan was still ringing in her head. If I had fallen in love with her, I wouldn't have plotted against her with you, let her get raped by that man, and then use that as an excuse to break up with her to be with you. I just hope that you can keep a low profile for some time. After all, we are partly responsible for causing her to hit her head on that nail. Of course not. You know that you're always the one whom I have always loved. If you weren't careless enough to almost let her find out that you caused Gu Liangwei's death, I wouldn't have gotten together with her to cover up for you. Brother Mingcheng. I am pregnant with your child now. You have to treat me well. I lost my mom when I was young. I really hope to lead a blissful family life with you. Silly, don't worry. I will definitely make you happy. The words which she thought she had forgotten, flooded back into her brain clearly at this moment. Gu Yoli's heart felt as though it had dropped into an abyss. Her horror was blatantly visible in her eyes. Her little face was as pale as a sheet as she started trembling violently. These words actually could not really agitate her. She was completely indifferent towards that slut and scumbag. What agitated her was the pale face lying lifelessly on the bed as those words were spoken. Actually, unlike what was written in the books that those who had died once would not be afraid of death, those who had died once are even more afraid of death. Chapter 39. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The dress. Do you like it? Gu Yoli tried to fight the panic at that moment. She would not allow herself to become weak. She needed to get out of this place right now. Gu Yoli lifted the blanket, changed, and ran out quickly. At the entrance of the hospital, Gu Yoli stared at the crumpled $50 bill in her hands. This amount of money wouldn't be enough for her to stay a night in a motel, but she didn't want to return to the ward. Will she end up sleeping by the roadside? At this moment, a car rolled to a stop in front of her and a cold voice reached her. Get in. Gu Yoli lifted her head in surprise and met the gaze that was brighter than the stars and wider than the night sky. Yu Feibai sat in his car and stared at her. In the silent night, she was standing at the hospital's entrance as the breeze played with her hair, making it messy. She was wearing her large camo military uniform which made her skinny body look even frilier. The boundless lights from the street lamps made her look like an abandoned kitten, delicate and lonely. This was a completely different image from that cold, overbearing, and vicious girl whom he had seen in the cafe that day. Gu Yoli's mind was still on the fact that she did not have enough money to stay in a motel. When she saw that the person in the car was Yu Feibai, her eyes lit up. She did not pause to wonder why Yu Feibai had not gone back yet and ran immediately to get into the passenger seat. Yu Feibai started driving, expressionlessly, and asked her. Are you hungry? Gu Yoli smiled. Yeah. I felt hungry so I was about to go out to grab some food. You can drop me off at the nearest eating place. She thought that he must have assumed her to be going for food when he saw her counting money at the hospital's entrance. I happen to be hungry, too. Let's eat together. Yu Feibai's words were overbearing. It was not a question but a statement. Gu Yoli, who was still worried about having no excuse to borrow money from him, could never let such a great opportunity slip pass. She smiled a little diffidently. We can eat together but I only have $50 with me. It will have to be your treat. Yu Feibai did not say anything. He did not even take a second glance at Gu Yoli. That made Gu Yoli feel a little defeated. She thought morosely that he hadn't even bothered replying with a yes or no. How am I supposed to have the cheek to borrow money if you're not going to say anything? The temperature in the car dropped down by a few degrees. Gu Yoli stared at Yu Feibai's side profile for long hoping that he would say something. However, Yu Feibai did not utter a single word. He kept his gaze straight ahead and steered the car adeptly, treating Gu Yoli as if she did not exist. Gu Yoli felt a little angry and finally gave up. She planned to go back to the hospital after that free meal. The car stopped in front of a private restaurant. This place was fancier than normal restaurants. It was quite late and there weren't many people around, so it looked a little desolate. Yu Feibai found a table next to the window and sat down. He immediately ordered a few appetizers and, very gentlemanly and surprisingly, asked Gu Yoli what she wanted to eat. Gu Yoli beamed at him. Anything. While they were waiting for the dishes to be served, not a single word was exchanged between them and the atmosphere became slightly awkward. Yu Feibai watched Gu Yoli calmly and seemed to be unfathomable like the depths of the ocean. Gu Yoli felt a little awkward under his gaze. His deep-set eyes seemed to have the ability to see through a person. She did not want to meet his eyes, so she kept looking around here and then, instead. Suddenly, Yufeibai said gently, "The dress. Do you like it?" Chapter 40. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Paranoia vs. Crazy Gu Yoli, who had been drinking water, suddenly choked on it. She looked up with trembling eyelashes. All this while, Yufeibai was sitting quietly. Please. Why did he ask about that for no reason? She had wanted to pretend that today was their first meeting. Yufeibai's eyes were as still as water as he met her gaze. Immediately, Gu Yoli shifted her eyes away and answered patronizingly, "Thank you, I like it." Ever since she had gotten to know this person, she had never seen any expressions on his face, and his eyes were always indifferent whenever he spoke. He was cold and only seemingly polite to everyone. But this kind of person actually was colder than a glacier. Besides, one look at him and Gu Yoli could tell that Yufeibai was a shrewd being. He was not someone to be trifled with. Yufeibai picked the cup in front of him and took a sip of the tea. Don't you know that it is only polite to look at a person when you talk to them? Right. I'm sorry. Gu Yoli stuttered and met Yufeibai's gaze again. Yufeibai's deep-set eyes were like a black hole that could suck a person's soul in. Her panic only lasted for a split second, and then she willed herself to calm down. Right about that time, the dishes were served. Gu Yoli started to eat even before Yufeibai picked up his chopsticks. The two of them ate silently, ignoring each other. Gu Yoli had not eaten the entire day and was wolfing down her food now. However, when she saw Yufeibai, who was sitting opposite her, chew his food elegantly, she felt embarrassed. She forced herself to slow down. When Yufeibai took out money to pay the bill, Gu Yoli wanted to borrow some from him, but she pressed her lips together and could not bring herself to do it. As they walked out of the restaurant, Gu Yoli kept her distance. Her smile was beautiful but also very formal. "Thank you for the dinner, sir." "Goodbye, sir." Those words had made it obvious that she did not need Yufeibai to send her back and he could take his leave. Yufeibai's gaze was still as indifferent as earlier. As he walked past her, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at her. Oh, right, they were so close to each other that she could almost feel his breath. Gu Yoli jumped back and looked up at him. His body fragrance assailed her nose boldly. She didn't know why she felt inexplicably nervous. Her heart had started to race suddenly. Yufeibai smiled a little, but his eyes were like ice chips. "If you don't want to return to the hospital, I happen to have something that I would like to discuss with you. We can go to my place." Gu Yoli's eyes widened and she looked at him with fear. "Why should we go to your house?" Yufeibai looked at her calmly and seemed to be mocking her. "What do you think?" His tone was a little weird and Gu Yoli could tell that he was trying to infer something. She squinted at him and replied coldly, "How would I know?" He took a step forward and stood even closer to her. Lowering his gaze to look at her, he said, "Do you have paranoia?" Gu Yoli was slightly stunned and also puzzled. "What do you mean?" A subtle flash of ridicule went past Yufeibai's eyes. "If you don't have paranoia, why would you think that I want to rape you? Could this person read minds? How would he know what she was thinking?" Gu Yoli's face started to burn and turned beetroot red, instantaneously. "Are you crazy, BDNV?"